Okay, is President Obama slapping the black community in the face again? Here's breaking news on another set of pardons and commutations for people convicted of crimes. Here we go.
Washington, we want to let you know about the White House just announcing hundreds of sentence commutations and pardons. Remember, a president can do this. Obama has a few days left. Among those just announced, former Army intelligence analyst Chelsea Manning. Manning convicted of leaking diplomatic cables and other sensitive documents to WikiLeaks back in 2010. Manning was sentenced to 35 years in prison, but with President Obama's actions today, she will go free on May 17th. MSNBC chief legal correspondent Ari Melber joins us now with more on this. So, Ari, obviously there was a lot of buzz in the last few days about whether President Obama might do this. Is this a big surprise here? And take us through exactly what this means.
It's fairly surprising. It is, I think, clearly the most prominent and probably the most controversial commutation of President Obama's entire term. Chelsea Manning, of course, convicted of serious national security crimes against the state, a long sentence reflecting what prosecutors thought he or later she, after elective sex change surgery, should face. And let's not forget, those are prosecutors that were working for the Obama Justice Department. This is a very big statement coming out of the White House that they think enough time has been served. And as you were mentioning, a very big difference. We've seen some commutations where you're shaving a few years or 5 or 10 off. Here you're talking about close to 28 years shaved off this sentence. I will tell you, this is something many people had clamored for. There was strong political and public calls for some kind of change here. The idea that this was a very fierce, a very long sentence for someone who didn't physically hurt anyone, who didn't do any crime of violence, was a very long sentence. On the other side, I don't have to tell you, Steve, you know it from the politics, this will be viewed as very controversial, particularly among conservatives and other folks in the national security community who feel that leaks, something that's been back in the news recently, that national security leaks against the state must be punished. So it's a big, probably the biggest commutation or pardon action we've seen from President Obama.
This is always the drama at the end of a presidency. Who will get a pardon, who will not? Ari Melber, thank you for that. Ron Allen, meanwhile.
All right, so obviously this is controversial, but President Obama did it. I have a question about him slapping the black community in the face, because obviously this is a LGBTQ issue, and I don't know how much pressure they put on President Obama to free this person. I know damn well that the military didn't put any pressure on him to free this person. So, you know, that is what it is. My question is, where are the pardons for Assata Shakur? Where are the pardons for Marcus Garvey? If you're unfamiliar with Ms. Shakur, in 1973, she was arrested during a traffic stop in New Jersey. A shootout left Ms. Shakur injured with multiple wounds, the driver, her husband, dead, and a state trooper dead. In 1977, after numerous trials, she was convicted of first-degree murder of the officer, and in '79, she escaped and fled to Cuba, where Fidel Castro granted her asylum. She was falsely charged on numerous occasions during the early 1970s, and she was vilified by the media. Okay, so the media basically railroaded her. Does Donald Trump trying to railroad the Central Park 5 ring a bell? They were fortunate that DNA evidence cleared them, but to this day, Donald Trump is still railing about their guilt. Okay, anyway, back to Ms. Shakur. She was charged with armed robbery, bank robbery, kidnap, murder, and attempted murder of a police officer. She faced 10 separate legal proceedings and had obviously already been railroaded by the media. In all except one of the trials, the case resulting from her capture, it was concluded that she was innocent, okay? She got acquittals, hung juries, or outright dismissals. They only got her on one of the charges. and that was highly questionable. Okay, she was convicted as an accomplice to the murder. Okay, according to the National Lawyers Guild, who represented Shakur in her final trial, the proceedings were plagued with constitutional violations, including an all-white jury of 15 people, including 5 jurors who had personal connections to state troopers. A state assemblyman spoke to jurors while they were sequestered, urging them to convict. So she basically got railroaded, okay? The judge, in addition, cut funding for additional expert defense testimony after medical testimony demonstrated that Ms. Shakur, who had no gunpowder residue on her fingers and whose fingerprints were not found on any weapon at the crime scene, was shot with her hands up and suffered injury to a critical nerve in her right arm, making it anatomically impossible for her to fire a weapon. So she got railroaded, okay? Fortunately for her, okay, she was able to escape and get down to Cuba, and Fidel Castro gave her asylum. But the evidence proved that she was targeted and framed by the covert and illegal FBI counterintelligence program, the baby of J. Edgar Hoover. Where have we heard the name J. Edgar Hoover before? All right, so that's her. She should have gotten a pardon, okay? Absolutely, she should have gotten a pardon. Here's another one, Marcus Garvey. If you're not familiar with Marcus Garvey, obviously he is a civil rights icon. Another good old J. Edgar Hoover special, Mr. Hoover basically went after Marcus Garvey. And let me give you some of the information. In a memorandum dated October 11th, 1919, J. Edgar Hoover, special assistant to the Attorney General, he wasn't even a damn Attorney General at this time, and head of the General Intelligence Division, or Anti-Radical Division, of the Bureau of Investigation, which is the precursor to the sorry about that, folks, precursor to the FBI, wrote to Special Agent Ridley regarding Garvey. Unfortunately, however, Garvey had not as yet violated any federal law whereby he could be proceeded against on the grounds of being an undesirable alien from the point of view of deportation. So basically, J. Edgar Hoover had targeted Mr. Garvey in order to try to deport him, targeted him specifically to get him out because he was advocating for civil rights for black people, not only in this country, but around the world. Sometime during November 1919, the BOI, Bureau of Investigation, began an investigation into the activities of Garvey and his organization. Towards this end, the BOI hired James Edward Amos, Arthur Lowell Brent, Thomas Leon Jefferson, James Wormley Jones, and Earl E. Titus as its first 5 African-American agents. So here we go with the infiltration. Although initial efforts by the BOI were to find grounds upon which to deport Garvey as an undesirable alien, a charge of mail fraud was brought against Garvey in connection with stock sales of the Black Star Line after the U.S. Post Office and the Attorney General joined the investigation. So here's, J. Edgar Hoover was a bitch. This guy had dirt on damn near everybody, and he used his authority even before he became Attorney General, okay, in order to collude or force various other government agencies other than his own to attack people. And in particular, this guy was a fucking racist because he used a lot of his power to attack black people. Now, okay, here's the accusation. It centered on the fact that the corporation had not yet purchased a ship which had appeared in a BSL brochure emblazoned with the name Phyllis Wheatley, after the African-American poet, on its bow. The prosecutors prosecution stated that a ship pictured with the name had not actually been purchased by the BSL and still had the name Orion at the time. Thus, the misrepresentation of the ship as a BSL-owned vessel constituted fraud. That's bullshit. The brochure had been produced in anticipation of the purchase of the ship, which appeared to be on the verge of completion at the time. However, registration of the Phyllis Wheatley to the Black Star Line was thrown into abeyance as there was still some clauses in the contract that needed to be agreed. In the end, the ship was never registered to the BSL. I wonder what happened there, okay? Most people believe that there was no basis for this particular lawsuit. Mr. Garvey decided to defend himself and was rather belligerent in his defense rather than using humor, humility, and perhaps a little grace before the jury. He basically alienated the jury. One of the lawyers for one of the other of the four men that were charged took a different approach and emphasized that the so-called fraud was nothing more than a naive mistake and that no criminal conspiracy existed. The truth is there is no such thing as any conspiracy, but the indictment had been framed against the defendants for discourtesy, mismanagement, or display of bad judgment. They all would have pleaded guilty if those had been the charges brought. Of the 4 Black Star Line officers charged in connection with the enterprise, only Garvey was found guilty of using the mail service to defraud. This was a bunch of crap. So all 4 people are charged with the same crime. 3 of them, okay, are found not guilty, but because of his attitude, he was the only one that was found guilty. Okay, Mr. Garvey ended up doing his time. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison. Garvey blamed Jewish jurors and a Jewish federal judge for his conviction. He felt that they had been biased because of their political objections to his meeting with the acting imperial wizard of the KKK the year before. Mr. Garvey said that when they wanted to get me, they had a Jewish judge try me and a Jewish prosecutor try me. I would have been freed, but 2 Jews on the jury held out against me 10 hours and succeeded in convicting me, whereupon the Jewish judge gave me the maximum penalty. He initially spent 3 months in the Tombs awaiting approval of bail. While on bail, he continued to maintain his innocence, travel, speak, and organize for his organization. After numerous attempts at appeal were unsuccessful, he was taken into custody and began serving his sentence at the Atlanta Federal Penitentiary on February 8, 1925. 2 days later, he penned his well-known first message to the Negroes of the world from Atlanta prison, wherein he made his famous proclamation, "Look for me in the whirlwind or the storm. Look for me all around you. For with God's grace I shall come and bring with me countless millions of black slaves who have died in America and the West Indies and the millions in Africa to aid you in the fight for liberty, freedom, and life." Okay, upon his release, Mr. Garvey was deported via New Orleans to Jamaica, where a large crowd met him at the Oretz Wharf in Kingston, Jamaica. Though the popularity of his organization diminished greatly following Garvey's expulsion, he nevertheless remained committed to his political ideals. So this was a railroad job, okay, plain and simple. I know for a fact that the Garvey family has directly petitioned President Obama for an official pardon for him. And given J. Edgar Hoover's history, and the fact that 3 of the 4 other people were found not guilty, it's obvious that the jurors were biased against Mr. Garvey. So he absolutely should get a pardon. I hope that President Obama has one last group pardon left up his sleeve in the next, I guess, 4 days before the inauguration of Donald Trump. But if he doesn't use his power to grant pardons to Ms. Shakur and Mr. Garvey, I honestly believe that we should make our displeasure known in any way we can, because this is just another instance where Mr. Obama, as he will be known in 5 days, has decided to turn his back on black people, where people that we respect, people that we want to obtain justice for, are ignored.